Like you just want to do some contextual shots. That's
okay. Maybe I'll maybe just get a shot walking in,
yeah.
sort of with the panorama of it.
You want to take the vacuum cleaner out of the way?
That's all right. I like the game over the light switch there. Communist Mutants from Space.
Communist Mutants, that's a great one. A great title.
Sounds like a 50s sci-fi movie.
Right. So this, what you're looking at right in this section, was just given to the archive. It's part of the Marvin Duckler collection for experimental television. Marvin Duckler is, he's still alive. He was one of the people who helped establish the public television TV station here in Tucson. But he also worked for the Canadian Broadcasting System and is what was the, I believe, the first lighting director for CBS television many, many years ago in their very first television studio, So he was in town, and he had dedicated much of his life to sort of pioneering what the television medium could be used for. So he worked with a lot of video artists, visual artists, TV artists back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. Helped found and run the National Center for Experimental Television or something like that. So all this equipment, much of which looks like stock equipment, like a video editing deck, which we've got a couple of, mixing boards and things like that. Most of this equipment has actually been modified by artists and engineers to do unusual things. But interesting thing about his donation was that he only had one request, in fact a requirement, which was that, like the rest of the archives here in the center, it has to be used. It has to be used for teaching in particular. And so just like all the items in the game collection are circulated with the idea of conservation through use rather than conservation through meticulous storage, all of the stuff in the Duckler collection too is intended to be used by up-and-coming TV artists who might be interested actually in trying out old analog systems and early ways of television production and distribution. So it's a pretty neat group of things. We actually don't know what all is in here just yet. There are lots of cassettes and tape formats. There's work in here that did things like pioneered techniques that ultimately were used in shows like Sesame Street and contemporary game shows and news broadcasts and things like that. Because when Marvin was getting a start, it was brand new. Television was new. These boxes are actually a small portion of the Arizona Media Arts Council, and we also were recently given their archives, which includes documentation and materials for the screening room and the Arizona International Film Festival and all those kinds of things. Those also will be part of the center. And those too need to be gone through, just like many archives and a special collections facility. They too need to be gone through, carefully documented and made into findable materials. Right now they're just stacked materials, but we need to have a way to actually locate things for people so that they can use them and study them. And this, as I said, is a small portion of the game archive. Started in 1999. and now representing a collection well over 10,000 games, over 100 working game systems, and then thousands and thousands of what we call paratexts, that is, materials that are related to the game industry, to game studies, whether it's, let's see, what would be a good example? You know, well, it might be unusual things like, you know, these unusual or these early adapters for VHF and UHF input, of which we actually have several versions. Here's another version, as well as books like How to Win at Super Mario Brothers games, an important text, landmark text in game studies. Two, if you come around the other side, again, none of this is organized yet, so it's a little hard to find things, but to various kinds of scholarship that have been done on games. This is actually our print archive numbers into probably 15 or 20,000 articles, again, from all over the world, many different languages, and again, from small journals to major university press pieces, but all of which deal with games and their use in culture, their use in training and education, and all that sort of thing. Also, we've got all kinds of industrial kinds of things. So, you know, trade books like illustration for toys and interactive games. So this would be a way to find, for instance, an illustrator for your game. You can actually take this book and look through, find a style that maybe you like, if you're in the industry, and say, oh yeah, I like this. Okay, it's Jeff Easley, and here's how to contact him. So we've got materials like that. Kind of how-to books, 3D game art. So for people not only who would like to learn how to do 3D game art, but maybe who are studying the process of doing game design. What do people who are trying to break into the field learn about? You would also want to look at books like that. Cheat guides, how to win at particular games, and we would have those kinds of texts, again, because if you're interested in the study of a particular game, or you're interested in a particular thread of computer game culture, those certainly would fall into that category. And then, you know, just regular sort of fan-based periodicals. Again, this is a very famous one from the U.S., Game Informer, but we've got them from all over the world in all kinds of different languages. Yeah, lots of things, lots of peripherals, old systems. There's a PS2, early Super Nintendo, SG-1000. You know, we've got some pretty unusual old games, antique games. Vectrex machine, which was the first vector-based graphics console for the home market. Plus, of course, all the latest game consoles. Most of the latest consoles, the last generation, the current generation, try to have at least 2 of each of those because they do get checked out by educators and researchers on a regular basis. Many of our members also give presentations to the community. We run workshops at public libraries and public schools, after-school programs, to community groups like Lions Club and Toastmasters and things like that. And we also, probably 2 or 3 times a year, we do one of our favorite things, which is to go to retirement communities around Tucson and talk to older people, not only about their own gaming and how they game, but also, inevitably, the questions turn to, I don't understand what my grandkids are doing. Can you help me with that? And so we'll help them sort of understand how the game industry works, how rating systems work, and do that kind of public outreach that we think is very important for the archive. So, Lots of peripherals. There's a skateboard if you're into that. This is actually a pretty old one. We've got much newer ones somewhere. Not everything in here is a computer game, though. So here's a custom version of Monopoly built around Super Mario franchise. Lots of handheld machines. Here's an early Nomad, a Sega Nomad. We probably have 20 or 30 different handheld game machines in this part of the archive, but the Learning Games Initiative has a number of chapters around the country and around the world, and each of those locations actually has their own connected, integrated part of the archive, and they tend to focus on specific things. So we have one, for instance, at Utah State, which is run by Ryan Moeller, and his archive specializes in mobile gaming. So he's actually got many more kinds of handheld mobile gaming devices and many more mobile gaming applications. But because they're all connected, all these archives are connected, if someone calls us and we don't have it, we can easily call Utah and have it overnighted to us if that's necessary, if there's someone who really needs it. The people who use the archive itself, who actually check things out, they range from Regents professors and very high-end researchers, university researchers, to people in the industry, to students here on campus and at campuses around town, to kids. We have a fair number of people from high schools and elementary schools who know about us, and they come in and they look at the materials that we've got. We help them understand that games are very expansive kinds of artifacts, that it's not just this one title, that this title is connected to a whole industry, a whole network of meaning, so we help them understand that. And we also will explain to kids, how do you go about being a game researcher? How do you go about understanding things like the political economy of games? We might not tell a fourth grader exactly what political economy is, but we will help them understand what it means when companies are owned and purchased by other companies, how distribution happens, and how that has certain political kinds of mechanisms behind it and things like that. So, and we also give them a smattering of history for that sort of thing too. So all levels of people, from the very young to the very mature, we work with all kinds of folks, and it's a pretty good research and community service endeavor, I would say, with a generous helping of teaching mixed in. I'm trying to think if there are other curiosities here. What all would you like to see? Anything in particular?
I just have some kind of random questions, I guess.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm familiar with a lot of these systems, just remembering from when I was growing up and the explosion of consoles and that. But I don't remember that Vectrex.
Uh-huh.
You said it was the first vector-based gaming system.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly does that mean?
So if you look at, I don't know if you're familiar with the game Tempest. Tempest is all these lines on it, or a game like Battlezone. If you look at the box, you can actually see what I mean. So a game like Asteroids would be another example.
Oh, okay.
So it's just a different way of presenting graphics, as opposed to using what are called generally called sprites, which would be. Let's see if there's an early version here. Well, it would be something like Pac-Man, if you think of a game like Pac-Man,
mm-hmm.
where it's basically a series of animated images that are moved through the game space. With vectors, everything is being handled mathematically, and the lines are being generated mathematically, sort of on the fly, as opposed to a pre-rendered illustration.
Okay. Something like Tron would be a vector-based game.
Yeah, that's a good example. That's it's funny. That's an interesting problem in a way, in that the game is definitely. Boy, that is hard. I'm actually not sure about the game, and here's why. The movie Tron that the game was based on certainly was imitating vector graphics. The thing was that, as I recall the story, I'd have to do some fact-checking on this, but as I recall, Disney actually opted not to use computer animation for many of those shots. Many of the shots in the movie Tron are actually animations, hand-drawn animations. They're not computer-generated animations. What I don't know is if in the game they opted for a similar kind of process, or if they actually use vectors. But that's the kind of thing that we would look into here at the archive. I'm trying to remember. Do you remember what system that was first released on?
Tron?
Tron?
I don't.
I don't think there was a 2600 version of it. I don't know if we have our 2600 games all over. Nice, neat array. No, it's just a tiny portion of it.
It seems like something that might be released for a computer system first, just because it would require more processing power, maybe, than a.
Yeah, but in those days, the early '80s, computers would have been. They were so expensive. Well, I mean, we did have the Plato system. The Plato system. Did you ever use the Plato educational system out of Urbana-Champaign?
No, I don't remember that.
I believe it used plasma displays, and I believe it was capable of producing vector graphics. But I'm not 100% sure. And
Oh, okay.
These are things that we have to look into. I can find that out for you, though, if you want.
Perhaps.
Probably, actually, a quick trip to Wikipedia would help us
That's
with
true.
that. Just one other thing that's kind of interesting about the archive that I'll mention is that there are a lot of, as you can imagine, there are a lot of things about the game industry that are, let's say, unsavory. Everything from labor practices that have been deeply questionable in the game industry, which I can talk about if you're interested in that. But also just things like X-rated games or hyper-violent games that have produced some sort of a public backlash, games that are intensely offensive in some way. Those games, too, we have here in the archive, or at least many of them, again, for research purposes, because our sense is that if people are going to comment on these games in a public way, whether it's through scholarship or through reportage, through writing about it for newspapers and so on, that people should actually lay eyes on it and actually see what it's like, see how it feels, and things like that. So we do have quite a few controversial games in the archive as well. Many of those games represent milestones in the history of this medium. Games that, when they came out, elicited such public outcry because they were violent, because they were hyper-sexualized or sexually violent, that they ended up creating federal policies, for instance, or corporate policies. Walmart deciding that it wouldn't sell particular kinds of games or even a particular game. So issues of censorship and product banning are also researchable here in the archive by actually seeing the different kinds of artifacts that led to those decisions. So we've got all kinds of those kinds of things. So this would be a very famous example of that, Custer's Revenge, which is an old 2600 game. So this is probably the quintessential offensive game, and was banned in many venues around the country and around the world. In fact, It's also one of the games that many people write about but have never played, and it's also a game that if you actually did play it, you would certainly be offended by the content, but you would a gamer anyway would be equally offended by just the terrible design of the game. It's just a bad game. It looks bad. It's offensive in every respect. But you can come into the archive and you can actually lay eyes on it and play it. You can hook it up to a game system and you can actually play it and see it for yourself, which is what we would like scholars, researchers to be able to do. Yeah, so we've got all those kinds of games too.
Okay. So just looking around, you can see all the different shapes and sizes and formats of cartridges and discs and all of that. So do you have, for every game that's in here, do you have the corresponding system
Yes.
that it needs to be played on?
Yes. At least I think we do. I would say that we probably do. There may be one or two obscure floppy disk cartridges or systems, games that we don't have the computers for, but I actually don't think that's true. We got a copy of Civilization, Sid Meier's Civilization, a sort of canonical resource management game. We recently got a copy of that for, I believe, DOS 2.0 system. And we did have to hunt, and it comes on a 5 1/4-inch disc. We did have to hunt down a version of DOS 2.0 for a computer that we've got here in the archive. It's in a stack over there that does have 5 1/4-inch discs, but we were able to find that and actually boot the game. So I think we do. There also may be a couple of games from China, perhaps, or Korea, and many of the game systems now are regionalized. So you can, just like with movies, you can't play a title released for the Asian market, or Australia, or the U.S. Games are released oftentimes in a similar fashion, and there may be one or two systems that we don't have for some of those titles. But I'm actually not sure of that.
Okay.
The archive has grown so much over the last few years that even I and Judd McGill, the other co-director, can't keep track of them all. We actually are waiting on a grant and some additional funding to help us organize this material, which it desperately needs to have happen. Even more so now that we're combining collections with the Duckler collection and the ASMAC collection and others. It's just a growing collection that we need to get a handle on. So,
Okay.
especially having moved too, that always adds complications to the process.
Right. I think I was a little disingenuous when I told you that I played first-person shooter games. Like, that was all I did. Now looking at these, I realize that video games have been an integral part of my life for as long as I can remember. And my dad always had to have the latest computers. Even I remember the first computer he had was a Tandy color computer from about 1980.
The Coco.
You know what? I don't think. Oh, you know what? Maybe it was a Coco.
Yeah,
it had a
color
integrated.
Computer was Coco.
Okay, that's what it was then. That's what it was. And he had a bunch of great games. He had a 5 1/4-inch floppy that had about 40 games on it.
Can you think of any of them?
Yeah, well, I can see them in my mind. I can see myself playing them, but I don't remember a lot of the names of them. I remember some good ones were Pitfall, which I know has been released for a lot of consoles for a long time back.
I think it was originally an Atari 2600.
That sounds right.
Yep.
Zaxxon was another good one
a great
that was
arcade
on there.
game. Yeah.
And there was my favorite one was there were a lot of similar ones. I think Moon Patrol is an analog of the game that I played, where you were in a lunar rover and you had to bounce over the stones and that, and you had to shoot something. I don't remember what, but that was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So.
Well, if you ever are feeling nostalgic, come on over. We'll set you up.
Oh, great. So you have a Coco here.
I'm not sure we have a Coco, but we do have all those games because Tandy was well known for porting, for buying and licensing, porting products to their game, to their computer. I don't know if they had any actually original titles. They may have early on for like their TRS-80, Model 2, Model 3 machines. I bet we do have actually a book somewhere here full of source code for the color computer.
Oh, really?
Use a version of Tandy Basic or something like that.
Ah, okay.
Did you do that? Did you ever type in all the code to make your own games?
I think my dad tried to encourage me to do that at some point. I think I remember fiddling around with it a little bit, but never getting too far.
Yeah, it was a tedious process.
Yeah, right.
To be sure. And then it would take you all day. You and your buddy would spend all day typing in the thing, and then you'd spend another week trying to figure out, where you misspelled the word print, or you left some command line out. Or something like that. So.
I did take a basic programming class in high school, and it was already outdated, I think, by that time. This was around 1995, probably. And so, yeah, I remember wrestling with those issues with basic, and I took a Pascal course.
Oh, Pascal too.
And the same thing. Yeah. But there was that system, and he also had an Atari 1040 ST.
Yeah, I think we've got one of those around too.
Okay.
Actually, that thing weighs a ton, doesn't it? It's a really big kind of, not big, but it's heavy.
Yeah.
Very dense machine.
It took up the whole desk, and he had a great game for it called Rogue. And
may have stumped me there.
Well, I recently, the point I'm getting to here is, even if you don't have all the consoles, I discovered a few years ago that you can get emulators for a lot of the old machines on the internet, and I was able to find an emulator and then find a ROM image of this game that I used to play. It was a completely maddening game that you couldn't win, and it was, once in a while I fire it up and to get frustrated again.
What was the premise of Rogue?
It was you started off in a dungeon on the top floor, and there were 26 floors, and each level was arranged with in a 3x3 grid where you had 3 rooms across and 3 rooms down, and basically you had to travel around the rooms and go through hallways until you found the staircase to go down. And you picked up items along the way, weapons like a bow and arrow, swords, armor, and fought monsters. There was actually a monster for every letter of the alphabet, and you could switch to sort of a bird's eye view of the level, and if you ran into a monster, it would be represented with the first letter. And so that way you could tell what monster it was, because there was only one monster for every letter of the alphabet. And it was, as you went down, the monsters got tougher, but not in a corresponding fashion to how much stronger you got. So you would get killed inevitably by about level 15 or so. And I understand that you had to eventually...
by L or M, you were toast.
Yeah, but yeah, pretty much. And it was completely maddening, and I don't even know if it's possible to win. I just thought I'd tap your experience.
Yeah, I don't know that we have that or not, but believe me, I'll look for that. So I got now, you've given me 2 projects now, Tron and Rogue. I look into these things. That's great.
Great. You let me know anything you find out about Rogue, if there's any tricks or cheat codes or anything I can use to...
Yeah, we may have a book here somewhere actually that would have the source code for that game. We have a number of things like that as well in the archive, so that might help you. Yeah. Can you? You probably can't on the emulator. You can't see the source code, I bet, can you?
Not that I know of. That's a little bit beyond my ken, but I think it's pretty plug and play. You can just play the game. That's it.
We have a fairly large collection of ROMs, emulators and ROMs as well.
Okay.
Those are a little bit tricky to use, because as I'm sure you know, that many of those are illegal, because they're basically unlicensed properties of the respective companies. Right. Many of them have fallen into what do abandonware is what they're often referred to as. They're no longer maintained. The companies that wrote the code, were bought up or went out of business decades ago. So probably no one is enforcing those laws. But not all of them are like that, and so you have to be careful about those things.
Okay.
And I don't know what the status is of Rogue.
Mm-hmm.
But we may actually have somewhere, again, we may have a copy of Rogue in its original package.
Okay.
But actually, I mean, just raising that issue of original packaging, when I referred earlier to preservation through use rather than through sort of meticulous storage, the idea that governs this whole archive is that unlike some archives, this one prefers that people remember this material culture, this part of what it means to be human in this, last century and this century, and in particular computer game culture, to remember it, to preserve that culture through experience, not simply by saying, look at these rare games, you can't touch them, but they're there, and if you get a special permit, you can play them. We actually would rather that people come in and play with them, and when they break, that's too bad, that's unfortunate, but the games and the materials will be remembered by people and can tell other people about it. So it's a form of archival work, of archival preservation that is used in other areas, especially in media arts, media studies. And we don't mean to suggest that other ways, more protective ways of doing conservation, artifact conservation, are less desirable or anything like that. It's just another way to preserve these materials. There are lots of archives, in fact, of computer game culture that are much more restrictive, that really don't want people handling materials. And they are fragile materials, especially older things. These early 2600 cartridges, for instance, are this is cheap plastic. These were made of in their time, and they decay pretty rapidly. So one of the challenges actually of being in this particular space, which was generously donated to us by Mary Wilner Bassett, the Dean of the College of Humanities, one of the challenges of a space like this is that the floors are concrete. And whereas, newer games, like anything for the 360, you could drop that and everything, all would be well. If you drop one of these old plastic cartridges, they actually shatter on the cement. Same with old peripherals. So here's an old Atari 2600 joystick. If you were to drop this on the floor, it would break into 1,000 pieces. Not simply crack, it would actually break in many pieces. So there are real risks to allowing people free access. You can see an old Coleco Telstar, one of the early home Pong machines over there. So this would have been an early home console, and you could choose between tennis, hockey, and handball, and they were all basically the same game. They just lined up the lines in different ways. And beginner, intermediate, and pro, that doesn't control artificial intelligence like it does in contemporary console systems. That simply controls the speed at which the ball moves across the screen. But again, you can kind of see this is a fragile device. So yeah, it's an interesting place to work. Here's another.
Wow. It's like at the center of the cockpit.
Yeah, and the amazing thing about this is a control system for a game called Steel Battalion, and the amazing thing about this is that every single one of these buttons does something in the game. And that's one of the things that made the game very, very difficult to play. You had to actually learn how to use all these different dials and buttons, and joysticks on top of joysticks, things like that.
Is all of this for one player, or is that a two-player setup?
Yeah, this is all one player. Actually, there's another piece of this, which is the foot pedals. There are actually foot pedals for this that you have to control as well.
Wow.
And it was actually for only one. There's only one game that interface works with.
Wow.
So you can imagine that was not a particularly successful game. The game was very, very difficult. It was expensive because of the peripherals. And as a result, it didn't get a lot of takers at the game stores. So
This connector.
that's for an Xbox.
Oh, okay.
Not the 360, but the previous generation.
Okay.
So
So it's not that old of a game. It's
no. It's probably 2002, 2003.
okay.
Something like that.
Mhm.
I'm guessing on a lot of these things. My colleague Judd Regill is much better at remembering some of the details about all these titles and things like that. He's great at that stuff. So yeah, if you want to see just unusual peripherals, that's one. What's another one? Yeah, this is an interesting one. That is what it sounds like it is. So this was connected to a Japanese game called Rez. Rez was released. It was a Japanese design game, released in Japan first and then the U.S. When it was released in Japan, it came with this vibrator, which was meant to be held in the lap of the person you were playing with. So one person played the game and was able to send vibrations to the lap of the person you were playing with. Interestingly, though, this is one of the things that we're interested in as researchers in terms of the study of game culture. When this game was localized for the U.S., that is, when it was brought to the U.S., they left this piece out and they just released the game. So in the U.S., you couldn't actually get it didn't come with a vibrator. It didn't have any kind of sexual overtone. It was just an interesting kind of rhythm game that you played, and the images themselves were not sexual. They weren't sexually overt. Very sort of geometric kinds of shapes. So you couldn't really you wouldn't make that assumption. So that's an interesting interesting peripheral. What else? Lots of guns and things like that. Of course, bongos, for instance. Things like this. That's for a new 360. That's for a game called Ace Combat, so flight games. Dance pads. Flak jackets. Somewhere in here, there's a flak jacket for an early game, so that when you put this vest on, and then when you were playing this shooting game, it had, I think, little solenoids in it, so that when you got shot, you actually felt it hitting you.
Wow.
So
very elaborate.
Yes, indeed. So all that kind of stuff, and now, of course, we've got things like this is the component for the Sony Move, which goes for the new Navy SEALs SOCOM game, and this all does motion detection through the Sony's eye system. So things like that. Other odd things like energy drinks that have been branded according to Nintendo products, and so on. That's the sort of paratexts that we're talking about.
Right.
So, yeah. All kinds of unusual things. There's also, sorry to walk right.
Oh, fine.
But like that piece there. So back in the day, Atari and Activision both, which made games for the Atari system, you could take a picture the television screen with a certain score that was dictated by the company, and you took a picture and then sent that picture into the company, and they would send you a patch, you know, for the different games. So these are just a few of those patches. There are actually, I don't know, 20 or 30 of them. And then, so on the back we've got a description of what each one did, what you had to do to get the patch for it. So for laser blasters, score 100,000 points. So yeah, we've got all kinds of stuff like that. So,
do you have any? I'm remembering all these video games I played as a kid. My parents had a big, I wouldn't even know what you call it, one of those table pong games that had a screen on the top.
like a cocktail, it's called a cocktail cabinet.
That makes sense. And it was Pong. I guess it was the original Pong.
Yeah, that's one thing actually that the archive doesn't have, and for one good reason, and that is space. We don't have any, at the moment actually, anyway, we don't have any arcade cabinets, the full upright systems, or even the cocktail ones, because they do take up so much space. You know, look at how large this space is. You know, you could maybe put 10 or 15 cabinets in here in this space, and pretty soon this is all going to be full. And since there are hundreds, if not thousands, probably there are thousands of those cabinets, it's just hard to go into that.
Sure.
You know, into that form of archiving. There are places that do that. In fact, a number of museums have started to do that. Places that have much more space. We would love to do that. In fact, my colleague Judd and I are working on a book on the game Tempest, and we probably will end up getting a Tempest cabinet for that project. But yeah, we don't have any of those things. We have connections with people at local and regional arcades, so that we can go in and get people connected with particular machines if they're setting them up. If they're doing research for them. But yeah, at the moment we just don't have the space.
Okay, sure, that's understandable.
Yeah, it's unfortunate in a way because, I mean, especially for those older games, it's it's one thing to play. Yeah, I mean, a game like Tron, since you invoked that, a game like Tron on an Xbox or on an earlier system, a Commodore 64 or whatever. But the original game was an arcade game. It was a cabinet game, and if you really want to try to understand the experience of playing that game, ideally you wouldn't play it on a ported version of the game for a home console. You'd want to play it on the actual cabinet, which has a very different look and feel to the game than playing it on other systems. It's a really different. I don't know if you were ever an arcade gamer.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So the arcade is a unique place to be. Sort of, again, culturally, it's a subculture all its own. Every arcade felt a little bit different. Some felt, some felt very kid-friendly and parent-friendly, much like a Chuck E. Cheese now, for instance. But many of the arcades I spent time in as a kid, they were pretty seedy and dangerous.
Right.
Feeling, there is actually a fair bit of sociological research has been done on the environments that were early 1980s arcades. So yeah, so that's a unique environment, and again, if you're really trying to dig into the history and culture of a particular game, it would be nice to be able to actually stand at one of those cabinets and give it a try.
Right. I remember playing arcade games, and then inevitably when the home console port would come out, always being extremely disappointed by it just seemed so far inferior to the experience of standing up at the cabinet and manipulating the the joystick and the the big buttons.
Yeah. There's a funny game in here. If I can, I'll show you this because it rings true to that. So this is the room we'll probably use for meetings. We're hoping to get some display cabinets and things we can put in. But this is just an old coin-operated, basically assignment game. You can put in there. But a funny thing, we just had an NSF grant meeting. We're applying for an NSF grant the next year. So we were meeting in here yesterday, and someone was playing this, and someone else came up and started putting a line of quarters down here. Which, if you were never an arcade goer, that would go right over your head. But of course, part of arcade culture was putting reserving your spot on the machine by laying down a line of quarters. So somebody did that.
Okay.
It's kind of a funny thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're slowly getting moved in here. This will be a nice display space, we think, and a good meeting space where people can do work. And you can see there's still a few things lined up. PlayStation kiosk, an original Donkey Kong control panel there. There's lots of strange things. But I would say almost all of the archive in the last 10 years has been used by someone. We probably get 20, 30 people a month who make requests of the archive. Sometimes more. As you might expect, when final papers and things like that are due in schools, we get a lot of requests for help with things. Not always to borrow the collection, but like confirmation of details and things like that about games, or photographs of the insides of manuals for some kinds of projects. Yeah, it doesn't seem to matter how old the system is or how new the system is. They all get a fair bit of play.
Well, I think it's great that this is all being preserved. It reminds me of the, I think it's called archive.org on the internet, that preserves ephemeral videos, newsreels, and that sort of thing. Because, I don't know, a lot of this, there's so much of it. You think you can find it all on eBay, but I'm sure that, so much of that is being lost.
Yeah, and a lot of it is being lost, including like the stuff in the Duckler collection. We don't actually know what's on some of those tapes, and they may have degraded to a point where we can't actually see what's on them anymore. But another thing that happens, and my colleagues and I have written a fair bit about new media preservation. Another thing that happens is that these artifacts get purchased by collectors, private collectors, and essentially locked away. So if you're a scholar, no matter where you are on the continuum of scholarship, from kindergarten through being a Regents professor, you lose access to that thing. So it may be being kept in a pristine condition, but no one can use it. No one can really understand it. And that's unfortunate. I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
But maybe those archives will someday come to auction, like many rare books do, and someone down the line will get a chance to play with it, which is what is meant for them to be.
Okay, with any luck. Yeah. We're just about out of time. I just have one more question. So what are some of your favorite games?
Some of my favorite games. That's a hard question for me because I play a lot of games, and I kind of learn to appreciate whatever is in front of me as best I can. I would say that the game Katamari Damacy is probably one of my favorite games, though. I think if I had to go back and play a particular game for a long time, that would be one. Tempest would be an old one that I like. I like Galaga, but I'm not particularly good at it. My colleague Judd is much better at it than me. What else? Yeah, there are a lot of great games out there, and it depends on my mood and how much time I have. Some games are really great if you have a lot of time. They're not games that you want to sit down with for 10 minutes. You
Right.
really want to sit down and puzzle through them. A game like Portal, for instance. I know that some people do like to just sit down and play one level, but there are so many interesting puzzles, and I'd like to put in a couple of hours into that at a time. And then games like World of Warcraft, that really you have to invest a lot of time into because they involve a lot of people collaborating, building teams, working together to achieve certain kinds of missions. That's another remarkable game, but again, you can't just drop in and out of that, when you're tired or something like that.
Right.
You have to be committed. So a lot of good things. How about you? What are some of your favorite games? Having had this trip down memory lane.
Well, I'd say some of those games from the Coco. I played those a lot. I enjoyed those. I like. We had an original Nintendo system when it first came out. There were some really great games for that, like The Legend of Zelda. My dad, in particular, still to this day loves the original Zelda.
You got to bring your dad over. I think he'd get a kick out of it.
I think he definitely would. He'd love seeing all of this old equipment because it would take him back down memory lane, which goes further than mine because he's always been an early adopter of technology and video games too.
Does he game now?
He doesn't game so much anymore. He has a Wii, but I don't think he plays it very much. And he used to play a lot on his Atari 1040 ST. He had a game called Silent Service. It was a submarine game.
Oh, sure.
Which I think they have for a lot of different systems.
Yeah, that was another game that was ported from the arcade. That one had a periscope and stuff on it.
Oh, the arcade version?
The arcade version.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But no, he would sit and play that for hours and strategize, and he would dive and release depth charges, and he would flank, and he'd do all kinds of things on there, and he loved it.
Yeah, you got to bring him over.
Yeah.
We'll set some things up for him.
I'm definitely going to tell him about this place.
You won't see him for a week.
Yeah, I know. You see, that's one reason that I don't really game much anymore is because I don't really have the ability to stop myself when I should. So
not good for a graduate student.
No, very bad.
Unless you're studying games.
Right. Well, I didn't know about that option when I got into this gig.
It's not too late. I bet you could work it into your dissertation somehow.
Perhaps.
Surely there could be a chapter.
Right. Well, there's a colleague of mine, just another graduate student who is looking at games on the internet, anti-immigration games on the internet. So,
is he looking at any of the games that are on the other side of that? Does he know about the game Crosser or La Migra?
I was thinking about asking you about that. I don't know if we have time or not.
I can at least show you that.
Okay.
It was developed by a guy named Rafael Fajardo and his team, which is called Sweat. Let me see if I can find that. And then he could, if he's interested, he could at least look Rafael up.
Okay.
You can help me look.
I was wondering, maybe it was over here.
Is it over there?
Oh, here it is, I think. Yeah, right there.
Right. Yeah. So, in this game, it's basically a Frogger-like game, but you play. This description. You play an immigrant trying to cross over, and then another version of the game you play a border patrol agent. So the politics about immigration, anti-immigration, are right on the surface, and it's a very interesting game. And I think you can actually download this. Here's the guy's name. I don't know if you can zoom in on it. Rafael Fajardo.
Maybe I can zoom in. Oh yes, there we go. Okay. Okay. So that's like freeware on the internet?
Yeah. I think Raphael. I'm not sure where he is at the moment. Yeah. Let me say here. Yeah, it says it runs on Windows, Mac, and Unix, but this was in 2004, so
Okay.
probably not. Probably won't run readily on Windows 7 or even it's Mac OS. But
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Maybe
But they
XP.
may have an online version. But anyway, just let your friend know
Okay.
about that.
I definitely will.
Is he studying sort of hate games in general?
I'm
or
not
specifically about.
I think this
immigration?
came out of a class, out of a paper or class project that he did. He's relatively new to the program, so it's a direction that I imagine he's interested
Is
in
he here?
exploring. Yeah, he's here in the Spanish department.
Okay. If you think it would be worth it, feel free to put him in touch with me.
Okay.
Because we have some of those things, not online games so much, although we do have a small archive of those. But things that have been released for PCs and Macs in some way, a commercial game, often with very small, limited release things. But those are some of those objectionable games that we do have. We have games that deal with Middle East politics and
Okay.
Send them over. We've got a number of things.
All right. Yeah, if he's still looking at that, I'll definitely I'll send him your way, 'cause he should look at that. All right.
Cool.
Okay.
Anything else?
Great. I think that's good.
Okay.
I think that'll do it. Thanks a lot, Ken, for
Yeah.
taking us up here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And, yeah.